Hello, gang. I'm just getting myself all, actually, my grandmother would say gussied up. Gussied up. Yeah, Grams. Grams would say, oh, I'm going to get all gussied up for that event. Hello, hello, hello. Here is your Monday poll question on this, the 16th of June, 2025. Which factor is more responsible for the rise in political violence at residences? Is it political polarization? That's the easy way to go. Or is it online access to personal data? I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. You can get lucky in no time at Parks Casino in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, located right in central Pennsylvania, off exit 29, off Route 81. That's 45 minutes from the state capitol in Harrisburg. Parks Casino, Shippensburg, close to Hagerstown and Martinsburg, and the nearby Pennsylvania towns of Carlisle and Greencastle. Parks Casino, Shippensburg, they celebrate military veterans on a day like today, every Monday. Show your military veteran ID, get a free hot dog lunch with chips and a soda as a thank you from Parks Casino, Shippensburg. Every Tuesday, tomorrow, it's the 50% golden discount. So take my recommendation, check out all the action, entertainment, and excitement that they have to offer. Parks Casino, Shippensburg, 100% smoke-free. 500 state-of-the-art slot machines, 48 live dealer electronic table games, a great daily happy hour, a lot of fun going on. Rain in the Northeast today and for a couple of days. So good excuse to get inside at Parks Casino in Shippensburg. Got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So the good news, I mean, nothing's good about what transpired in Minnesota, but the good news is they got this guy. They got this guy. I hate to even say his name, but Minnesota Governor Tim Walz hailed the work of law enforcement, pointed out, on Father's Day, you had hundreds of members of law enforcement, countless different interconnected agencies, all in pursuit after this 48-hour manhunt. They ended up getting him not far from his home after a police officer saw him flee into the woods. Thank goodness he surrendered without any further gunfire. But of course, former House Democratic leader Melissa Hortman, her husband Mark Hortman, are gone. Speaking of Father's Day, just think about the kids. State Senator John Hoffman, Yvette Hoffman, still recovering from their injuries. It's a much broader subject than just that which transpired in Minnesota. And I'll tell you something interesting. I was already going to talk about this, and we'll share with you some of the resources on which I will draw. And then picked up my print edition of the Times and page one above the fold, which I'm showing to those who are watching on YouTube. Violent action tied to politics is new reality. I am worried about who's going to serve. I am worried about who's going to serve, and I've had these conversations. I've made these points previously, not because of violence that now comes to the doorstep of public servants, but because of that which has transpired at public meetings. And these are obviously interconnected, but I've often told stories about the school district in which I was born and raised and educated K through 12, and in which my father worked as a teacher initially and then as a guidance counselor. The Central Bucks school system, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, widely regarded as one of the best in the Commonwealth. Contention, really vicious behavior has come to Central Bucks. And in the midst of the pandemic, it was heated about masks and about protocols and COVID-19. I remember coming on and sharing stories about some individuals that I knew from a public health standpoint who came in from the local hospital and addressed a meeting and were hooted down, a board member who needed a police escort, board members who were being threatened with violence. And I said at the time, like, who's going to be willing to inject themselves into this fray? It's going to be the fringe. It's going to be the fringe. And now it's become a seesaw battle in that school district as to whether it's going to be the conservatives or the progressives who control it. Everything has gotten so partisan, and now everything has gotten so violent. And this New York Times front page story is just amazing. Listen to this as a reminder. The statements of shock and condolences streamed in eerily, one after another, on Saturday after the assassination of a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband and the attempted murder of another lawmaker and his wife. Horrible news, said Representative Steve Scalise, who was himself shot at a baseball game in 2017. Or Paul and I are heartbroken, said former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband was bludgeoned with a hammer in 2022. Or Gabby Giffords. My family and I know the horror of a targeted shooting all too well. She, of course, was shot in the head in 2011. Still more came from Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, subject to arson just a couple of weeks ago. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who was herself subject of a kidnapping plot in 2020, and President Trump. Quote, such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the United States of America. He himself subject to 2 assassination attempts. In the past 3 months alone, a man set fire to the Pennsylvania governor's residence while Mr. Shapiro and his family were asleep inside. Another man gunned down a pair of workers from the Israeli embassy outside an event in Washington. Protesters calling for the release of Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado, were set on fire. And the Republican Party headquarters in New Mexico and a Tesla dealership near Albuquerque were firebombed. And I don't know about you, I'm so consumed with the news cycle that we tend to move from event to event to event. And consequently, sometimes it's necessary to step back and look at the big picture. Robert Pape studies political violence. He from the University of Chicago. He's been a frequent guest of mine. In fact, we were exchanging text messages over the weekend, and I'm, find myself saying to him, well, sadly, you were right again. And then I was doing some reading about this subject of political violence, and I found a story that begins this way. Threats to high-profile officials are on the rise, and would-be attackers seem to cause harm or fear, are increasingly trying to hit them where they live, literally, according to a new federal intelligence bulletin. It's a Department of Homeland Security bulletin dated March 11. Quote, a concerning recent uptick in personal residences targeted has left well-known people in both public and private sector and their families and their staff vulnerable to attack in their own homes, and comes at a moment marked by historic partisan tensions. Well, here's a little twist. What I'm reading to you is a year old. It's a reference. This is an ABC News story, and it's a reference to a March 11 memo, not from 2025, but from 2024. And the whole story from ABC reads as if it could have been written just yesterday. It talks about private homes being a soft target. And then in the ABC story, I came upon this, quote, we are now faced with a threat dynamic like never before, said Donald Mihalik, a retired senior service agent and regional field training instructor who served during 2 presidential transitions. He's now an ABC News contributor. In the past, we had to worry about a physical attack, an environmental attack, a nuclear attack. Now we've also got to worry about these multiple prongs via cyberspace. Don Mihalik is a friend of mine. Don Mihalik, I know Don and I know his wife Val because both have been such champions of the Garden of Reflection in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Another, all roads lead through Bucks County. And for years, Val has been the person who has staged the 9/11 remembrance ceremony at the Garden of Reflection. Don is a wonderful guy, and he will be a guest of mine on radio today talking about exactly this issue. Because I know we are all tempted to look at it as a matter of polarization and turning up the heat. But the added dynamic here is the availability of public information, is the ability to find out where does a federal judge reside? Where does a state representative reside? Anybody with whom you have a beef. And that is why I'm asking the question that I'm asking today. By the way, something else about that DHS memo. As I was going down a rabbit hole this weekend and looking for more information about the government response to the threats against public servants in their homes, there was this from Reuters. The Trump administration gutted a program that aims to prevent targeted violence as part of its effort to downsize the federal government, a move that could come under fresh scrutiny after the deadly shooting of state lawmakers in Minnesota. And the story goes on to say that the Center for Prevention of Programs and Partnerships is what it's talking about. It's part of DHS. I didn't know this. This story got by me. William Braniff, former director of the office who resigned in protest in March, said the office went from having 45 full-time staff and several dozen contract workers to just a handful now. The Trump administration has prioritized combating illegal immigration while shrinking other DH offices. So there's more to the story, but the point is a reduction of government during the course of the Trump administration limited the ability of an office charged with this responsibility. So that's got to get fixed. I mentioned Don Mihalik and I mentioned ABC. All right. So lo and behold, 5:07 a.m. today on this Monday, Don and Richard Frankel wrote on the exact issue that I'm talking about. Headline: The lawmaker shootings in Minnesota are a disturbing trend. And so this is what the two of them published today. They go back through some of the incidents that I've already referenced: Gabby Gifford, the Trump assassination attempts, the congressional baseball game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they reference a 2015 Secret Service, Don's a former Secret Service agent, study that examines attacks against the federal government and sheds light on the perpetrators. It found that offenders chose their targets for reasons that include the following: retaliation, the furtherance of ideological beliefs, personal gain, or seeking fame and attention. Nearly half of these offenders exhibited evidence of fixation, an intense or obsessive preoccupation with an individual, activity, or idea. And then further along, it explains that it's become much easier for them to now take out their aggressions because of online availability of personal information. They can find their target in a way that previously would have been difficult. So there's much more to this. Don will be a great guest on radio today. And now you know why I'm asking the question as to the driver. One more paragraph, if I may, because I know you're inclined to simply vote for polarization. I want you to at least give consideration to the alternative, which is easy access to online information. From the ABC piece today, which is in the newsletter. It is in the newsletter if you want to read more on this. Quote, as the study points out, the digital age, with its access to the dark web, violent online content, and the ease with which individuals can identify public officials, their residences, and their activities, has created unprecedented targeting opportunities. This helps explain the observed increase in violence across all levels of government, including state and local officials, a trend that unfortunately appears to be continuing. And I would say is not only continuing, but it's on the increase. That is today's poll question. The Monday poll question at Smerconish.com. Which factor is more responsible for the rise in political violence at residences? Is it political polarization, or is it easy online access to personal data? And I don't know how you rein that in. I'll ask Don when he's my guest, but I just don't know how the horses left the barn, fill in your own expression. I don't know how we turn that back. We live in an age where that kid in college was tracking Elon Musk's plane and becoming a burr in his saddle. There's so much public information out there. I told the story about how before it was acknowledged publicly on any of the networks that Israel had launched this strike against Iran, one of my sons told me it was underway because he looks at signals intelligence. And then there was that story, kind of funny, about the pizza establishments that are around the Pentagon in the Virginia burbs, and how they all saw a spike. And if you simply look at the pizza orders, something's afoot in the Pentagon. We live in crazy times. One last thing, just in terms of the last couple of days of voting, Saturday, unbelievable, 62,355 votes were cast on Saturday. Did Israel's strike against Iran make the world a more or less safe place? 56.14% said less safe. Jury is still out on that question, as far as I'm concerned. Have a great day. Vote on the poll question. Like and subscribe, and set yourself up for notifications. Thank you, gang.